thanks very much indeed to both Claire and Annie in comprehensively going through the whole area of mineral nutrition linked to performance of the high-yielding dairy cow. Just a couple of points. Today's conference is a qualifying event for the Dale Farm Sustainability Programme. So those of you from Dale Farm, please take note and identify to the relevant Dale Farm person, but this is a qualifying event. There's a significant number of questions, and I have to hand over to Gary Thompson, Chair of our Dairy Committee, who will chair the last session when we have the panellists here, and really looking at the future research needs, particularly for the systems that we've talked about here today. So while I'm questioning Claire and Annie, if you can be thinking on that before I hand over to Gary. As I said, the number of questions here, we could be going to midnight, but that won't be the case. I'll be handing over to Gary shortly. But Claire, a question for yourself that you've generated a number of questions on is just to explain a wee bit more about Q fever and the implications of that on your farm and some of the considerations behind that.
Yeah, I wanted to chat on Q fever, but I knew my presentation was long enough. Q fever came into the herd last year. I'm pretty certain it wasn't there before. Was never testing, but the typical symptoms of Q fever is caused by a bacteria called Coxiella. It usually presents itself in terms of reproductive problems, so getting cows in calf and early and late abortions is usually your typical signs, plus a lot of hill cleanings is usually what you see. That wasn't really the case for us. We didn't have all them hill cleanings. Reproductive issues weren't massive. The first sort of signs we seen, we were near the end of calving. This was coming in January, February. It started to see these signs. So the last 10 cows to calve, I would say 5 or 6 of them calved in grand, done everything perfectly. About 12 hours afterwards, I seen appetite go. So they ate the bar full of silage, and then after that they sort of went into limbo and didn't eat that well. We pumped them, got them going, and eventually they'd get going. That was first symptom. Second symptom, I started to see a couple of cows come a bulling shortly after being PD'd in calf. So we're PD, and there'll be somewhere between 28 to 40 days when they're PD'd calf. And a couple of them, there's maybe about 6 or 7 come a bulling after being PD'd in calf. Usually, over the course of the season, I'd accept 1 or 2 of them, but 5 or 6 was sort of starting to get a red flag for me. That there, plus what else? The next thing was started to get rumination crashes, sporadic through the cows. I'd say there's 8 to 10 cows rumination crash, so I got an alert on my phone. The Sensub colours flagged up rumination crash. Went to see that cow. She was laying in the cubicle, chewing her cud, looked perfectly fine. And she did. She remained visibly perfectly fine looking. The phone was telling me her ruminations on the floor. The next milking, or even 2 milkings time, our milk yield would have been down. It could have went down as much as 60%. So it really did pull the wind from her. As I say, she remained looking good, healthy, but we pumped her and got her going. Rumination went down for about 2 days and back up within 2 days. Milk yield would have took about 2 weeks to recover. So they did. Look, we covered the dry cow debt. Dry cow was grand. We looked at acidosis. We looked at mycotoxins. Ruled out everything. Went back to basics, tried to rule out everything. But I was certain that it was something infectious, just the way it was hitting cows. Those rumination crashes were in late lactation cows. They weren't even fresh cows. But there was something tying all those things together. So I said to my vet, look, think of something infectious outside of what we're vaccinating from, something outside the ordinary. And we just went through process of elimination. We said, right, let's test the bulk tank for Q fever here. Came back positive, so I tested for the level of antibodies, and it came back quite moderately high. So there's a vaccine there. It's sort of new, but I felt I had no other option. I wanted to get out of this. So we vaccinated. Takes a double vaccine. It's an expensive vaccine. It's probably the same price as salmonella, so about £7, double vaccinating. The second dose to give us half price, so it took £10 to vaccinate double dose the cows to start with. But within that as soon as I got the first jag, rumination crashes stopped. We've still seen cows, a few embiotic deaths. By the time we got the booster in, all those things disappeared. So I can probably put for a chunk of money on the fact that it was Q fever. It's not the normal symptoms, but that's the way it presented itself on my farm. So we haven't seen no symptoms this year. We've got through 12 months past there of being fully vaccinated for Q fever. So.
Thanks, Karen. Another question for yourself that probably stimulated by the speakers this morning. Have you thought about robots, and would it not drive cow performance and make life easier?
Yeah. In the short term, I've decided against robots. I want to be a block calving system. I fell in love with a block calving system. It tightens everything up, streamline. I finished my calving before starting my breeding. I like tick box, get the job done. Calving's done, we're on the breeding. Breeding's done, we're on to the next thing. I like to be busy when I'm busy and quiet when I'm quiet. I don't want to calve cows all year round. I've enjoyed moving away from that there. But that's saying that there with me in the ground and my dad in the ground. If my dad's not here, the labour thing changes big style. So I'm not saying it's off the radar completely, but in the short term, I'm moving towards a block calving system, and that doesn't really lead itself to robots. So in the short term, I've set it to one side.
Annie, a question for yourself here. In Northern Ireland systems where we're highly dependent upon grass-based silages, with high-performing cows, is there anything from a mineral basis that we need to be looking out more carefully for?
Well, I think it starts with exactly what Claire said about making good silage. But yeah, absolutely. Grass silage for a high-performing cow is not going to be balanced for mineral. So, but it's going to be different across different farms depending on where they're starting from in terms of what is available in the soil, what is then available as to be absorbed into the grass. So where I would start with is analysis, making sure that the grass silage is being analysed for mineral so that the rest of the diet can be balanced around it. There'll be different shortfalls depending on where you are across and depending on what your soil type is, where you're taking that grass silage. And also when in the season you're cutting, it'll be variable in terms of what the mineral is available within that grass silage. I would also be really careful around, like I said, around if there's any soil contamination, that will affect mineral supply into the grass silage probably more than anything.
Claire, that leads on to a question to yourself. What is the key to your quality silage? Is it reseeding?
Reseeding, yeah. Reseeding usually every 7 years, 10 years at a push. High energy, we're all aubers, usually picking for the top on the grass variety list, usually within the top 5 or whatever. So we usually work with 3 for a few years there I made my own mixes, just from time point of view went back to using commercial ones, but it's usually all aubers, high energy ones, reseeding regularly. I still like the sheep on the grass over the winter time to clean things out, and cutting regularly, cutting every 5 weeks probably.
I'm glad you like sheep in the winter time. Another question, probably the most popular one here, with changeable weather patterns, how will you adjust your grazing during wet or drought periods, and what do you do during these periods? I suppose we're sitting at the 15th of April and there's people definitely have that question in mind.
Yeah, well, it was all my neighbours were turning cows out the grass there, and it was very tempting, so it was, the sun was shining. I went through it. I have that criteria, I stick to that criteria. I went through that criteria last week again, just as a reassurance that I was doing the right thing. We got 6 cows that were eligible to go to grass. 6 cows that were eligible to go to grass full time, 22 that were eligible to go to grass by day and by night. It wouldn't be worth my effort to graze them. So I'm conscious that I'm putting the right cows in the right system. I'm not going to put cows out to grass unless it's the right thing for them. So cows are still in. They'll probably go out some stage in May here when I get enough cows to fit the criteria. In terms of wet or difficult grazing times, that's why I set the criteria at, say, 32 litres. That criteria is for a cow to survive in the most extreme conditions. So if it comes in real wet, on maintenance plus from forage goes down to 12 litres. I can rank up my concentrate feeding in the parlour to a maximum of 10, 5 and 5, and that 32 litre will just about survive. So it's making sure the right cow's in the right system. But also, the ones go out by day and in by night are probably don't feel the wet days as much, because I can feed them a wee bit, or feed them a wee bit more in the wagon at night. So it's just about making sure the right cows and batching them, basically.
Annie, question for yourself here. Can zinc improve nitrogen efficiency? Something that's very topical here in the north.
So I think we're beginning to see the start of research indicating that that is the case. Yes, that if we supply zinc probably somewhere in the region of around 100 milligrams per kilo dry matter, yes, we can see some differences in nitrogen retention. I think what we need to understand is the dynamics around that in terms of what are the other dietary aspects that change that nitrogen retention that are separate from the zinc, because what's been done so far has been published in sort of academic research papers where they've got one variable, that's what they've changed, and they have seen differences. What we need to understand is, how do we make that practical? Are there any other consequences of taking zinc up that high? If there aren't, what are the things? How do we start to implement within that? And is that economic? Does the zinc form matter? There's lots of questions to be answered, I think, to understand it. The simple answer is yes, we have evidence, but I don't think we know how to implement that practically on farm yet.
Time is really pushing on, and I'd say a huge number of questions. So one more question to Annie and one more question then to Claire, and I'll draw things to conclusion. Annie, you mentioned you were out in New Zealand. What are the good diagnostic methods that are used out there to monitor mineral nutrition, and can these be applied here in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, so they would be doing a lot of liver biopsying on either live animals or cull animals at critical points in the production cycle. So obviously thinking about a lot of spring calving systems when they are in late lactation, looking at doing liver biopsies, blood sampling to try and understand what the mineral supply is in the diet at that point and whether they need to change that while that animal is dry. So do they need to intervene in some way in terms of increasing mineral supply, reducing mineral supply, trying to optimize the balance within that animal based on those liver blood results? What I would say is, I think a lot of them are measuring it and monitoring it. They're not all using the data. So I don't think that we can say this is absolutely what you should do, because some of them are measuring it and then you go, well, did you change that? And they go, oh no, didn't look at that bit, only looked at that bit. So I think they've still got some way to go as well, but they'd be doing a lot more measuring and monitoring than we are.
Claire, there is an awful lot of practical questions here, so I would anticipate that people will be speaking to you afterwards. But the whole area of making this very mature silage to feed to your dry cows, is it not more hassle than it's worth, and would just not straw-based diet and minerals not be the right way to go?
It's not hard work. It's making stemmy silage, it's making rubbish. It's not hard work. Straw's probably too low of energy. You're probably going to go too much the other way and end up with pre-calver. That silage with that amount of straw and that pre-calver is probably the most cost-effective way you can do it. So otherwise you're going to end up, to feed them all in straw, realistically, it's going to be actually more costly to do. You're probably going to have to go and replace with energy and with protein. So there's a fine balance in the cost effectiveness of it. The ideal diet is grass silage. You could bring a bit of whole crop in there from a starch point of view, or on straw, but it's probably impractical to be using that amount of straw and just relying on the pre-calver to deliver everything else.
Folks, as I say, huge number of questions here. We don't have time. I want to be able to hand over to Gary to chair the next session, but can I ask you to show your appreciation to Claire and Annie? Thank you very much indeed.